Reading with your kids.
Hey, so great to see you. Come on in. Hi, my name is Jedlie, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, coming to you from the lovely neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted that you're joining us here today. Augie the doggy is by my side, getting ready to welcome in two wonderful guests, Anthony Manna and Don Babbish. They are the author and illustrator of Loukas and the Game of Chance. Before we bring Anthony and Don in, we want to let you know that the Reading with Your Kids podcast is going to be at the Orange County Children's Book Festival, October 6th. It's happening in Costa Mesa, California. This is an amazing children's book event. It is the largest children's book fair in North America. Imagine that. And we are going to be there. We're going to have an exhibitor booth. It is booth number D5, and you can find that in the yellow section. We're also going to be presenting the Reading with Your Kids Magic Show on the Illustrator stage. That's happening at 12:40 and 2:35. Now, one of the things that I'm really excited about is that people who are attending the Orange County Children's Book Festival on October 6th in Costa Mesa will have a chance to meet so many of the authors that you've heard here on the show. In our exhibitor booth alone, you're going to have a chance to meet Lisa Caprelli, the author of Unicorn Jazz. Dennis Matthews is going to be there. He is the author of Bella the Cello. Marla Humer said that she's going to do her best to go over there. You might remember her great book, The Circus Fish. Also, Helena Bailey is going to join us. It is going to be so much fun. And again, it's happening on October 6th, the Orange County Children's Book Festival in Costa Mesa, California. We do hope you'll be there, and please stop by and say hi. Joining us on the line right now from Poland and Ohio, we have two guests, the author and illustrator of a great new book called Loukas and the Game of Chance. Please welcome to the show the author, Anthony Manna, and the illustrator, Don Babbish. Gentlemen,
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. We're so happy to be here. What an honor.
Yes, thank you.
That first voice you heard was the author, Anthony, and the second voice, of course, Don. Anthony, why don't we start with you? Could you tell us a little bit about what Loukas and the Game of Chance is all about?
Well, sure. It's something that I've lived with for quite a few years now. Loukas and the Game of Chance is about a young boy. It starts off that he's a young boy who loves his flute. He's given a flute at birth, and he becomes inseparable from it. And he happens to be on an Aegean island, and goes to the seawall to play the flute from time to time. And one day a snake appears out of the seawall, and his and starts what is miraculous, starts dancing to Lucas's music, much to Lucas's surprise, but not his fear. And Loukas goes back and tells his family, and on it goes until the snake is appearing over and over again. And every time the snake appears, he leaves behind not one, not two, but 3 gold coins, which makes this very poor family very wealthy over time. Mm-hmm. Loukas, eventually what happens is Loukas loses it all. He grows. We see him growing up a little bit there, and then finally what happens at a card game to a wily merchant, he loses it all. He loses his family, he loses his riches, and of course he loses his honor. So the next part, of course, is that he decides that he's not going to give in, that he's going to muster up his bravery, and he's going to go out into the forest and into the enchanted forest, and look for Destiny. Destiny's son, the sun, and Destiny's daughter, the moon, to beg them to help him win back his integrity, his honor, his family, and his riches. And so the rest is up to the reader to decide whether that happens or not. And that's Loukas and the Game of Chance. It's about loss and the journey to hopefully to recovery, and that's what it's all about.
This is fascinating, and I can absolutely. Anthony was mentioning that when he goes out and visits middle grade audiences and shares a little bit about Loukas and the game of chance, that the kids are fascinated, and I'm not surprised because kids at that age, this stuff is what really grabs their attention. Lost, and whether it's monetary or a person in their lives, and these are all kind of subjects that they hear about, but I don't think a lot of adults want to really talk to kids about this kind of stuff. So I think that there's a lot of questions that they have, and I think that they're going to absolutely be drawn to this. What was the inspiration for the story?
Well, you see, this goes back a bit. You may see that I am a retired university professor of literacy. And so for years, I've been working with school teachers, with elementary, secondary, et cetera, on getting their kids to become, alert readers and writers. Let me put it that way. And so what happened was, at one point in my career at the university, I landed this wonderful grant to go to Greece and do research and do my work in classes there at the university in Thessaloniki, which is up north on the Bulgarian border. Well, and this city was founded by Alexander the Great in 36 BC. So there I was, and I was in a kindergarten classroom doing research on what I'm calling literacy events, which is basically just trying to figure out, how do these teachers in this Greek school, how do they approach literacy and reading and writing? Well, to make a long story really short, I started, as my Greek was getting a little better, I could see that they were reading a lot of mythology. I mean, there was Zeus and Demeter and Atlas and Helios and Athena and Artemis and Icarus, and I witnessed all of these exploits and shenanigans of these mythological characters. But then all of a sudden, I started seeing that these kids were reading about giants and rival stepmothers and charming princesses and princes, confused brothers, liberated sisters, wise and witty daughters, wretched goblins. So in other words, what I was finding myself into were the folk tales and the fairy tales. And I realized, wouldn't it be wonderful with one of my colleagues there, who's become the co-author, wouldn't it be wonderful to take some of these beautiful stories that are not very well known in English-speaking world and translate them into English, reshape them, reimagine them, and try to publish them in the States and wherever else they might go in English. And that was the beginning of what I'm calling the folklore or the folk tale or fairy tale project. And so right now, that's what I'm doing. I mean, I'm taking a Greek story from time to time and trying to retell it in such a way that it captures the flavor of the oral storyteller on the page, which is the challenge that I face and that I face with my co-author as well. Mm-hmm. So that's the beginning of Loukas and the Game of Chance. It started off as a story called The Snake Tree. And I just took it and for about 2 years really worked on it and expanding it into a full-fledged fantasy. And that's where I'm at.
That's fantastic. I love where inspiration comes from, and I love the fact that it can come from anywhere. Dawn, what was it like for you to create images and illustrations for such an amazing story?
Well, what made it interesting for both of us, I think, is that we were able to collaborate together on it, which is kind of rare. Mm-hmm. Usually the writer will send the story off and the publisher will select an illustrator, and there's no communication between the two. Mm-hmm. But this was a real combined effort. I would ask him, how do you see this character? And then I would describe how I would see the character. Then I would do some sketches, and we'd come back together and look at it and make possible changes or not. And it was a collaborative, collaborative effort for both of us.
Mm-hmm. And it was a different effort for you. Is this something? Did you enjoy this experience?
Oh, I very much enjoyed it. I did a book back in 1994 that I wrote and illustrated. And I always thought illustration was the only thing I wanted to do. But recently I've gone into fiber art, but I enjoyed this very much. And I would like to do another one down the road. In fact, we're talking about doing another one. We had a very good friend, Amina Robinson, who was an artist in Ohio. And she won the Genius Grant a few years ago. And we've been talking about doing something about a biography dealing with her.
Fascinating. Anthony, I definitely want to talk a little bit more about Loukas and the Game of Chance and about the other books that you've written. But we're here on the Reading with Your Kids podcast, and this is all about inspiring parents, families, caregivers to read more together, and about the importance of that, and not only the importance of reading with our little ones so that they can start to understand how to read and develop their reading, but also carrying it on and reading with kids of all ages. I think that Loukas and the Game of Chance would be a fascinating book for a family to read together, to co-read, maybe not snug it up, reading aloud, but it would be a great book to read, co-read, and then talk about what kind of what kind of conversations do you think families can have if they're co-reading Loukas and the Game of Chance together? And it also can, as an expert in literacy, how important is it in your mind that families continue to do this as kids go through middle school and high school?
Well, when I go into the schools and I show them my process, and I actually do PowerPoint of what the manuscript looks like and how sometimes it's a total disaster on a given day. And, I have to go through the process of showing them what I go through as a writer. And they tell me in their comments, later that they felt very inspired by this. Well, I think this happens in a family when you sit down. I mean, it's the same kind of phenomenon. I think what happens, you sit down and you read with expression. Mm-hmm. You read with delight. You even do what I do in the schools. I do the voices of the characters, mm-hmm. And I try to make it come alive a little bit so that it's not just a boring process of counting the words. You know what I mean? So it's like, how can I make that story come alive? And so when I go out, and also parents are in the audience, I tell them, come on, get up and, and do some dramatization, change your voice from time to time. Don't be shy, because, you're there in your family. No one's going to make fun of you, and you're going to make this reading experience come alive, and you're going to hook kids on reading good books. Mm-hmm. And so that's my spiel. Even when I was in Greece, and I would meet up with parents, and I had a translator next to me, and it was the same kind of thing. And I think that people take to it because they realize that start young, continue moving, reading aloud, offering books, and also into middle school, high school, and just keep reading aloud and talking about the books that you're reading, and then helping them find. That's another thing that's so important, is helping kids find really good books. Mm-hmm. And on my website, I'm trying to do that more and more with showing people the resources they can go to so that they don't have to go to a library and stand there and say, now what? Because there are so many lists that are available of, from the American Library Association, from Children's Book Council, on and on we could go with this, where they'll learn about really good books for kids at certain ages, going up into even what we call now new adult. After the young adult books, what about the new adults? And there's a list at ALA, the American Library Association, which is the 10 best books of the adult world for teens. Mm-hmm. So
you make a really good point about, as we're reading with our kids and training our kids to kind of read, to visualize what they're reading, and also to be animated as they're reading it, and not just, kind of going through the words. The example that I use with my kids, there are stories that we've heard 1,000 times, especially anybody who goes to a church or a mosque or synagogue. You've heard these stories over and over and over again. And they don't mean as much because you just hear them. But if somebody makes a dramatic reading of a story that you've heard in church or synagogue hundreds of times, but then just kind of dramatizes it, it has a whole new meaning. And it really adds some power to the story, and it really wakes you up to what's going on. So I really appreciate that idea of encouraging families to be more animated as they're reading and reading together.
Well, I mean, I think you are a performer yourself, and so you know how kids respond to that. I mean, and I just love going out there and talking to them. I mean, they tell me, in their notes that they leave behind, that the teachers collect for me, they say, you inspire, it warms me so well. I mean, it just makes my day I just feel like I'm accomplishing something when they say things like, you inspired me. And I have one right here that I was reading earlier today, which says, I never thought I could get up and read my writing, to anybody because I thought they were going to make fun of me. But because you did that and you showed us your writing, what you do as a writer, and then I got up and now I know that I can do this. And I thought, wow, thank you.
Yeah.
That's pretty terrific.
Yeah. Inspiring kids to express themselves creatively is such a wonderful thing, but it can be a challenging thing too, because a lot of times kids are shy and they may not want to share what it is they wrote, and they may not want to share a magic trick that they learned how to do, or they may not want to share an illustration that they've created. Don, what do you think are the best ways to encourage our kids to have that courage and to share what it is they've created?
Most of my experience was on the elementary level, and at that age, kids are pretty much willing to share their work, especially when you try to show them that there is no one way to do anything. Everybody has their own way, and all of it's quite acceptable. And then in that process, you're trying to teach them some skills as well. And when those two things are combined, the kid is more willing to share than before. Some kids are naturally shy, but I think when you work with them and when you show other children's pieces of art, I think it really bolsters their ego, and then they become more willing to do so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of fun, helping kids kind of find that creative side of them and to, really express success when they're either they're writing or they're illustrating or they're doing something creative, when they feel like they've created something and this is mine and it's I'm expressing myself. A really unique kind of joy kind of happens with them.
That is so true, and you see it all the time. I mean, one thing I should mention here too is that when I went, I can't remember how many months ago it was, but I went out there to start sharing pieces of Loukas in the Game of Chance in a middle school. It was a 7th grade class, and I had the illustrations with me that Donald did, and they were the originals in my hand, and I slipped them out of there very slowly and very dramatically, and they were like, oh, look at that snake. And I said, I wish the illustrator were here, but I sneaked these out of his studio because I don't know if he wants me to show you these, but boy, I'll tell you, let's take a look. And they were just so, and I noticed that when they were writing their thank you notes to me, quite a few of them were drawing. And little scenarios of their life or something, and I thought that was very inspiring.
Yeah. One of the things that happens with me after my magic shows, very often I'll receive a big packet full of drawings of the show, that the kids create and send along as a way to say thank you. And it's and some of the pictures of what they saw me do on stage. I'm like, wow, I really wish I could do that. That would be amazing.
That's great.
Now you've been writing children's books for a long time, Anthony. What led you to writing children's books?
I think I had been. I'm sure you know, as many people would know, that in a university job, you either publish or perish. And so I had to do a lot of academic writing. And I was always, but then in my courses, I was teaching literature. I was either, graduate, undergraduate, children's literature, young adult literature, on and on it went. That was one of the opportunities I had at the university. And then I never considered myself to be a story writer. But all of a sudden I thought, well, because of my connection with the Greek folk tales and fairy tales and the myths, I thought, let me see if I can do this. And with my co-author, Sula Mitakidu, we cranked out the first story, and we were so lucky, and so I mean that's where it started. We sat down and I thought, could I do this? I don't know how. I know how stories work, but can I construct a story? Do I have that talent? Mm-hmm. And so I sat down with Sula because we took a Greek fairy tale, and we translated it from the Greek. We reshaped it. We retold it over and over again. We worked on it really, very closely because I was in Greece at the time, sitting at the same computer side by side, translating into English, etc. It was so magical. And I thought, well, gee, I think I'm doing this, and then when we sent it out, in those days, you didn't really need, there wasn't too much talk about needing an agent. You sent unsolicited manuscript, you just sent something to an editor. And we were so fortunate, to receive, Ann Schwartz, who was then at Knopf. And, she said, look, this story is really in need of a lot of editing. I thought, okay, here we go. And so she really, because she is such a great editor now she's at Random House now. She really taught us the art of shaping a story. And, it was so kind of her to do that, to take us under her wing and, help us, and she, I learned from her an awful lot. And these days, because I'm involved in a critique group, that was also the best thing that I could have ever done, because you bring your pages and people are honest with you about your writing. And I have learned so much from these 3 or 4 published writers. And it's been an enormous journey for me. So it started with that little inkling of, could I possibly do this? Mm-hmm. To really learning that we were creating award-winning books. And by the way, we just found out yesterday afternoon that Loukas and the Game of Chance has just won an award. It's called the Book Excellence Award.
Congratulations.
I'm so proud of that. I mean, and because I really because they said it's an award for design and a number of other things, not only for the writing. Well, I felt very good about that because they recognized Donald's illustrations as pretty powerful, so it's been a wonderful trip from that first understanding of, could I possibly do this, to, knowing that I can, but always knowing that I can always improve.
And that's something that I wanted to touch on as you were speaking. There are so many, one of the things about kids, and I think it's one of the, especially guys, especially in middle school, one of the things that I think really prevents them from being all they can be at that age is this feeling, this fear that they have to put on this front of, I know everything. I know what to do. I don't need any help. I don't need to ask any questions. And, I can't let anybody find out that I don't know all the answers, because they know all the answers. Meanwhile, none of the kids know anything. But it's refreshing for you, college professor teaching literacy, and you're honest enough to sit down and say, I need some help doing this. This is something new for me. I want to learn how to do this. And I know for myself as a magician, the first, I think, decade as I was performing, I would learn things in my house, and I wouldn't hang out with other magicians because I didn't want them to know how little I knew, and I think that's, I don't know if that happens with illustration and art, but I think if if that's one thing that we can teach our kids is just the fact that learning's a wonderful thing, and admitting that you need to learn and that you need help. It's the key to learning more and becoming all you can be.
And it's so great that you say it that way, because I think over and over again I have found, and even with my university students over the years, that they would be so shy at the beginning and they wouldn't want to, they wanted to, in a sense, hide, and then it's the same thing with these middle school kids that I work with, or the middle grades, they're a little bit reluctant, but then see, if I show them my challenges, let me put it that way, as a writer, by revealing to them my manuscript on those PowerPoints, and then I also, the other part of this too is I will also show them Donald's renderings, early renderings of characters, etc. And they are, again, see, I think it just tells them, look, here's this old guy up there, who's saying, look, I really do need somebody to tell me what's going on here, and I think they learn from that an awful lot,
And even when I look at the finished illustrations, I'd like to go back and redo them again. I can see I could make changes here and changes there, and why didn't I do this? And I would do that a different way, but that's for the next book.
I hope.
Well, it sounds like you guys have a lot of fun working together, and I do love that. If there's nothing else that anybody gets from this interview, parents, don't be afraid to let your kids know that you're not perfect. That's a really hard standard to live up to. The minute we can let our kids know that, hey, I need some help sometimes, just like it's so important for our kids, it's so liberating for our kids to kind of sit back and say, oh, I don't need to know everything. I can learn some more. It's so liberating for parents to kind of sit back and allow their kids to know that they're not perfect and they're willing to learn and to learn together with their kids. I think that's a wonderful thing.
Well, that's beautiful. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we want to learn is where we can learn more about Loukas and the Game of Chance and all your other great books, Anthony.
Well, I think if they come to our website, which is www.anthonymannabooks, that's MANNA, www.anthonymannabooks.com. On Facebook, I'm Anthony.L.Manna. On Twitter and Instagram, I'm Dr. Tony. That's Dr. Tony 42.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And is there a website where we can learn about Don's illustrations?
Well, he doesn't have a website right now, but I mean, you can come to me because I have, there are quite a few pieces of his artwork that will be available too. Especially now because he's doing award-winning felting, and a lot of people wonder what is that, and that's why it's so wonderful when they ask that question, because I can show them on the website some of his felting pieces.
Yeah, I need to know what is felting.
It's a process of taking wool, dyed wool, and using various size needles. You create tapestries and designs. There are two forms of felting. There's wet felting and the needle felting. And I don't do the wet felting, at least not yet. I don't have the space for it. But I'm into the needle felting. It's just not the felting is we'll call it textile art. It's a combination, sort of a mixed media.
Wow, that's I'm on my way to AnthonyMannabooks.com to find out more about felting and see some of those examples.
Great.
I'm also on Instagram, and one of my pieces is on Instagram. It's just under Donald Babbish.
Awesome. Well, we've had the pleasure of talking to the author and illustrator of Loukas in the Game of Chance, Anthony Manna, Don Babbish. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks a lot. We love your work.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Nicole Panteliakis. She'll be here to tell us about her beautiful book, Planet Earth is Blue. Before we go, we want to remind you to join us, please, October 4th at the Orange County Children's Book Festival. We will be there. We have a great exhibitor booth. We're going to be featuring a number of our wonderful Reading with Your Kids guest authors. in that booth. We're also going to be performing our magic show, so check it all out. The Orange County Children's Book Festival, October 6th at Custom Mesa, California. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so very wonderful. We want to thank Anthony, Manna, and Don Babbish. Be sure to check out their book, Loukas and the Game of Chance. Also want to thank my amazing producer, Fatima, for all the work that she does. Be sure to check out her blog on the readingwithyourkids.com page. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the wonderful support that she gives me. And we want to thank you. Thank you so much for being part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. And thank you so much for helping to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.